I am so excited this game is out, and we are going to skip the intro because that's not the point of this video. We're not here to do a Let's Play, we are here to test out the performance. And wow, we're up in the like 90s and the hundreds, into the 80s here. But what are the graphics settings? So the biggest problem I've seen so far is that the graphics settings in this game don't give you a lot of options. However, I can't get into the graphics menu until we kill these enemies. You can't get into the system menu as far as I can tell during combat. But I'll tell you right now what we're playing on. This is a GTX 1060 6GB. And the rest of the system is really high-end. So the CPU and the RAM are way above what you would normally pair with the 1060 6GB. So do keep that in mind, although the CPU requirements in the system requirements list are fairly low. So I would not be too worried about that. And one reason I wanted to test this game out on the 1060 is because the system requirements list, the recommended is a GTX 1080, but they state that that's for 1440p. And then the minimum is like a GTX 780, but they don't specify what resolution, frame rate, all of that that's for. So I was curious, a 1060 kind of falls in between. How does that do at both 1080p and 1440p? So that's what we're testing out. Now currently, we are absolutely maxed out on the graphics settings, which again, I'll show you as soon as this combat is over. The graphics settings really only give you two options, high and low, and only for two things, textures and shadows. It's honestly very disappointing. So we now have our access to our system menu, and options and graphics settings. Check it out. So you get borderless full screen or windowed. Unfortunately, there is no exclusive full screen mode, although correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in DX12 titles that might not be as big of a performance hit as it is in earlier games. But anyway, so hey, I'd like to see an exclusive full screen option though, but we don't get one. Screen resolution you can select. We'll try out 1440p in a minute. Texture resolution, it only gives you high or low, there's no medium. Shadow resolution, it gives you high or low, there's no medium, and then that's literally it on graphics settings. Other than the number of characters displayed, which I don't think this is a section of the game where this is going to really matter, it defaults to 8. I slid it all the way up to 10, but we're not out in the open world right now, like in the city environment, where I think this would actually have more of an effect. Now the frame rate, I like that it lets you go up to 120. I don't like that it only gives you the options 30, 60, 90, 120. I'm on a 144 Hz monitor as I'm testing this, and I can't select that as an option. I also can't select unlimited. I'm guessing somebody will mod this into the game, because that's a pretty common mod to make for a lot of games, but I hate to see that. So I've got to say that from a PC port perspective, the performance seems good, but the actual amount of settings we get for PC players seems abysmal. It does have HDR support though, so hey, look at that. We're going to record an SDR since you know, most people watching the video won't be on a good HDR display. Anyway, so there we go. So right now we're on the highest possible settings at 1080p, but that's not saying a lot. That just means turning those two up to high. So, anyway, this is what the game looks like at high settings 1080p. And the performance seems quite good. You can see that in a lot of situations, we are actually locked in at 120. Now, I'm imagining that there's probably sections of the game, like possibly out in the open world, that could be more demanding than this. But considering we are able to hit the, you know, very, very good frame rates maxed out in this possibly easier to run section of the game, I think that bodes quite well for what this will be like in a more demanding section. I imagine that we would still stay up pretty good in the actual frame rates. I'll also say that when I initially loaded the game, it had a lot of stutters, but those stutters have been mostly solved by playing through this section of the game again, which tells me that I think that these are... by the way, I'm switching down to low shadow resolution to see what that does to our frame rate. Didn't seem to have a huge impact, but hey, there you go. Anyway, as I was saying, I think we saw a lot more stutters which happens when assets load in a lot of DX12 games, especially I've noticed in Unreal Engine, which this is, to my knowledge. So, if you're noticing a lot of stutters in the game, just realize that that's probably just going to happen as long as you are in a... it's the first time you've loaded that asset, and it should get better over time. That's generally how these things go. Let's see, so let's get down here into combat. Again, I have turned down the shadow resolution.
Get him, boy!
Should we try out some, like, abilities? I believe I could use spells. Let's use fire on the dog. Performance seems to still be pretty solid with these, you know, flashes and fire effects. All of that. That's good to see.
Hey!
Looks like you're next.
So notice the memory usage is up around 5.5 gigabytes of VRAM. Now that's allocation. I don't know if the usage is actually that high. So that would be something to keep an eye on. Looks like not a skip I can do. So what I'm curious now is if we lower the texture settings. If we lower the texture settings, let's see if my memory usage goes down, right? The green memory usage there. So we're now going down to low. Okay. That goes all the way down to about 3 gigabytes. So the question might be, could you run this on a 3 gigabyte GPU? And that does appear to be the case. Now that's slightly over 3 gigabytes, but again, allocation and usage are not necessarily the same thing. So all signs point to running this on low textures being okay on a 3 gigabyte card as far as I can tell, so that's good. And the textures still look like, I mean, like, the game doesn't look horrible. Keep in mind we're basically on low settings now because we've turned from high to low on both shadows and textures.
This way.
Now, I'm curious. Again, I need to apparently wait till it gives me permission to access my
We've got
settings
company.
menu, which we don't have right now. Okay, it's going to go into combat scene. All right, we'll do this combat on the low settings and textures, and then I want to try turning textures, or sorry, shadows back up, but leaving the textures on low, just to kind of compare. Basically, to simulate if you're on a 3 gigabyte card, how you do with the high shadows but lower textures. Alright, let's end this combat with some fire.
Enough.
Overall, this, obviously I'm paying more attention to the performance than I am to the actual combat here. But the game seems fun so far. Obviously this isn't a lot to go off of. I really enjoyed the original PlayStation game as a kid, so this is promising to me. I'm excited. I'll be testing this out on some other GPUs as well, my 6800 XT and my 6600, so keep your eye out for that. So we're turning the shadows up, leaving the textures low. I'm curious what that does to the VRAM. Okay, look at the VRAM allocation now, seems to be hanging out around 4 gigabytes. Now again, possible that usage is actually lower, but it seems like if you had a 4 gigabyte card, this might be the way to go, because it seems to hang out around 4 gigabytes. So it looks like everything on low for a 3 gigabyte card, shadows high, textures low might work out for 4 gigabytes. And then what I'd like to try out next is if we turn everything back to high and then render at 1440p, what happens. So we're going to turn textures back up to high, shadows at high, and now let's do 1440p. Keep in mind this video is only recording at 1080p right now, but we can still test the performance hit of 1440p. So we've got it basically maxed out at 1440p, and honestly, performance still seems quite good. Did I go backwards, guys? Am I paying so much attention to talking that I went backwards? Is this an area I don't feel like we've already been here because the, you see all those stutters I'm getting on the frame time graph? Or am I going over my VRAM allocation? Oh, interesting. Okay, so I definitely accidentally ran back to the beginning of the game. But do you guys see all those stutters on my frame time graph? I was curious if that was loading new assets or if I'm actually hitting over my VRAM limit. Remember, this is a 6 GB card. Those stutters feel kinda like I'm over my VRAM limit. Out of curiosity, let's go ahead and turn down the textures and see if it's still that stuttery running through that area. So I'm gonna go down to low on the textures. That should drastically lower my VRAM requirement. And now let's pan the camera a bunch through this area. I think that was it, guys. Look at this. Do you see how much smoother this is? Look at the frame time graph down at the bottom, okay? Because our actual frame rate stayed good, but the frame time graph was horrible. And actually playing the game, I don't know how well it showed up in the YouTube video, but actually playing the game felt very stuttery and bad. But look, by turning down the textures, we are now under our VRAM limit, so that was definitely the problem. So let's now, again, see if we can repeat the problem. So I'm going to turn the textures back up to high, and let's see if the stutters come back. So again, it was fine at 1080p. I think it's at 1440p where we might be hitting a VRAM limit. Yeah, do you see the stutters in the frame time graph again? So I am 100% certain that those stutters are being caused by passing our VRAM limit, and it's trying to bank some things into system memory instead of GPU memory. You might be like, but it's only 5.5 GB usage. Yeah, but the game's... I think that's still the issue. It's just not actually showing a 6 GB usage. It's trying to push stuff off into the system memory. So my next question is, okay, what if we leave the textures high, but we turn the shadows down to low? Does that get us into a non-stuttery situation? Because that should also reduce the VRAM usage. Should also increase the performance, because having to render fewer shadows. Interesting, I feel like we're still hitting it a bit stuttery here. Not as bad though. Definitely not as bad. Ooh, that's not great though. Very interesting. So yeah, it's looking like 1440p is definitely possible, but without putting the textures on low, it seems like you're going to be hitting some VRAM issues with the 6 GB of VRAM. That's what that feels like to me. Let's turn the textures and shadows down to low, just to get a benchmark with everything on low. And again, I know it's probably not too interesting to look at, but if we run back through the same scene again, it's going to be great for comparing the frame rates in the same area, right? To see how much frame rate you're gaining. And again, look at this frame time graph, guys. See how smooth that is? So my conclusion is, you can absolutely play this game at 1440p, but you're gonna have to turn the textures to low in order to get your VRAM under control. And then shadows at low help the overall performance a bit. But I think textures on low, and then let's turn the shadows back up and see if our performance stays good enough to be the recommendation for 1440p. So, it looked like down here by the train, we had gotten down into the mid-60s with everything at low. Let's check if that's fixed by the shadows. Well, we're still getting down into the 60s here, so I don't feel like the shadows are having a huge benefit to the frame rate, at least in this lower area that gets down into the 60s. You can see that we're definitely not running into a VRAM issue anymore, and the frame time graph feels a lot smoother. Interesting. Okay, so let's go back to graphics settings. So yeah, shadows high, textures low. I think is going to be our 1440p recommendation, and out of curiosity, because our performance is actually pretty good, let's go ahead and actually render this thing at 4K. So we're gonna go 4K rendering, and we're gonna start out with everything on low, and just see what happens, guys. What I'm honestly just curious about is if you'd be able to hit a like 30 FPS. Because on a console game with a controller, like for example, the PlayStation 5 at 4K only runs the game at 30 FPS. It's not a 60 FPS experience, so. Looks like our VRAM with the low settings is actually under control here. Honestly, the 4K performance here seems reasonable. Remember, this was our lowest performing area, at least in this section of the game. It looks like we are maintaining above 30 FPS. What happens if we turn the shadows back up? Our VRAM so far seems okay. Let's turn the shadows to high. Is that gonna kill our frame rate too bad here? Our VRAM went up, but not too far up. This section here, I mean, we're still above 30 FPS. So honestly, it's feeling like 4K at a, you know, 30 FPS and maybe above is doable, at least in this section of the game. Like I said, there could be more demanding sections of the game where maybe you'd be falling below 30. And if that happens, I could retest later in the game once I make it there, if I feel like there's a significant performance hit. You guys could also let me know in the comments section if you've made it further in the game already, or you're watching this video in the future, if you feel like this was a fair test or representative area of the game. Let's go ahead and actually try kicking on the textures to high. I think we're gonna hit the VRAM cap and hit a bunch of stutters. Yeah, if you look at the frame time graph now, you'll see a lot more stutters again. So that's the issue with the high textures, is that you're just gonna get these stutters. It looks much better, but you get stutters. Let's try it out in combat. Ooh, combat seems rough. Okay, yeah. 4K combat does not appear like it's going to be a reasonable thing to do. That didn't feel good, guys. Did not feel good.
That's it.
Okay, let's go back down to 1440p and make sure we actually get into some real combat at 1440p. So 1440p, I'm gonna go. Was it shadows on low where I felt like we saved enough VRAM to not be too stuttery? Let's see how it goes. Interact. I need to hold it. Can't just push the button once, guys. We gotta hold it down.
Come on, Cloud.
Pick up the pace.
Okay. Pans out pretty far, but the performance still seemed to stay pretty good. Sorry, I'm skipping the cutscenes, guys, but I want to benchmark gameplay here. Wait, we've already been this way. Interact.
Damn, I'm good.
What's your language? I want my
Who's
YouTube
there?
videos
Door!
to be family friendly.
Oh, wait! It's over!
That's my line.
Okay, that cutscene seemed to stay over 60 FPS.
He's alone! We can...
Okay, so I can switch modes and things.
Make
Neat.
it rain!
Okay, so I wanted to mainly just test out some combat at 1440p. And it looks like with the shadows on low, everything stayed
Then let's move.
He always knows
very
just what
solid
to
there.
say.
Cut it out.
And let's finish out the video by doing 1440p with the shadows back up to high. And again, I think we'll see some issues on our frame time graphs, but let's
It's a
test
good
it
thing
out
I know
a bit.
someone who can get us the passcodes. Pity no one else at command.
I got this place covered.
Okay. I literally can't target this thing. Aren't I supposed to hold Y? There we go.
So, you know Tifa, right?
Sure do. Let's skip this. Again, I don't skip this when I'm actually playing the game. Don't yell at me in the comments. Okay.
Gonna throw your sword at him? Let the man with the gun go to work.
So again, notice the frame time spikes. I think we're seeing some VRAM issues
These
here.
tin cans ain't got nothing on me. Now for the real show. Damn
Although
it.
the overall average frame rate feels okay. So I think it's going to be up to you to decide what makes sense. I feel like this video is getting a little bit long, so we're going to end it here. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section, and have an excellent day.